Today we examine the NHL trade rumors around the Vancouver Canucks. Are they actively trying to trade defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson? Plus we're going to examine the San Jose Sharks situation as well. Will one of their big defensemen be moved soon? We'll explore that a little bit deeper here today. Plus we have news from the NHL regarding some firings today. Of course, we already discussed Barry Trotz. We have another situation in Ottawa, some more signings, injuries, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First up, of course, in case you didn't hit the news or you didn't see the video earlier, the New York Islanders have moved on from head coach Barry Trotz, which was pretty surprising news for most NHL fans and reporters around the NHL here today. And nope, not too many people seen that coming. Apparently, there were some rumors after the end of the season, just kind of circulating that maybe they would move on from Trotz. That Lou Lamoriello's, reasoning was he felt the team needs a new voice. He had met with the players to conduct exit interviews, of course, after the season, which is normal procedure. And then after all that, decided that a new voice was needed and Trotz was no longer the guy. Of course, he did have a lot of good things to say about Barry Trotz as a person, but just wasn't going to be the coach in Long Island anymore. So obviously, I'm sure Trotz's phone and his agent's phone is probably blowing up. He's one of the top coaches around the NHL. Of course, recently won a Stanley Cup before coming to the Islanders. Has had a tremendous amount of success. I would think teams like the Philadelphia Flyers, the Devils, who are not completely sold on keeping Lindy Ruff as hometown province of Manitoba, the Winnipeg Jets are needing a new coach. There's Chicago, Detroit. There's no shortage, and I would imagine there's other teams around that are still actively even in the playoffs where teams are going to be waiting to make those decisions. And if there's going to be any changes until after their season is over, some of those coaches might have a little extra pressure on them now, knowing that there's suddenly a top name free agent coach on the market. So we'll see where things land, but surprising news there out of Long Island here today. If you want my a little bit more deeper thoughts and full analysis, you can check out the other video on the channel where we discussed it in its entirety earlier. Now, of course, we also saw another situation where somebody was fired in the NHL today, and that was the Ottawa Senators firing Pierre McGuire. Pierre McGuire was hired by Ottawa not even a full year ago. It's almost 10 months exactly that he was hired. Essentially, I believe his title was a director of player personnel, like a VP type of role. Essentially, the main reason McGuire was brought in, the main thing was on the work on the pro scouting side to help bring in some veteran players to insulate the young guys, and that was obviously not handled well. It sounds like obviously they were very unhappy with the Michael Del Zotto signing, and it sounds to what we were hearing from Ottawa media that he was kind of blamed for pushing for that signing, and it didn't work out, and he's kind of taking the fall here. But at the end of the day, McGuire was an odd signing. Melnyk hired him, like I said, to give Pierre Dorion some additional support. Obviously, he still had a time on his contract left, and because of Melnyk passing recently, to get the firing approved, he would have had to go through the small board that he reports to right now, while Melnyk's daughters decide how they're going to handle the future of the franchise. But certainly a situation that many people were scratching their heads when he was hired, and now not so surprised when he was fired. McGuire, of course, worked in TV for a long time. He did sell his home in the U.S. in Connecticut, moved to Ottawa last year after getting the job, and didn't end up lasting for very long. I mean, he recently was on some scouting trips too as well with Pierre Dorion and other Senator staff. So it's a little surprising in a sense, but I guess we'll see where this goes. I'm not sure if he'll get more opportunities or not. Pierre McGuire, I think, means well. It's just he has a different way about him, and a lot of people sometimes don't know how to take when he speaks. I know a lot of the interviews he conducted or things he said on air caught a lot of people off guard, which is just the way he is. So we'll see what the future holds for McGuire. No word yet if Ottawa plans to bring anybody else on board on an already fairly thin executive staff to give Pierre Dorion and the rest of them there a little bit extra help navigating through this very important offseason as they try to take this team up a notch for next year. We did get word today from the NHL as well who the finalists are for the Norris Trophy for top defenseman. No big surprise really at all. It's down to Victor Hedman, Roman Josi, and Cale Makar. And to be fair, I think Josi and Makar are likely 1-2. I mean, there's an argument for both. McGuire is obviously probably more dynamic, but Josi was probably a little more complete this year. Hedman, I would imagine, is likely going to be third. He had a good season. It was certainly the best of the rest, so to speak, but I don't think he'll have the votes to be the winner this year, but we'll be getting some more as early as tomorrow. I believe the Vezina Trophy nominees are coming out tomorrow. I know Kevin Weeks had put out a tweet earlier saying what he was told the finalists were. I know Igor Shesterkin was one of them, as well as along with UC Saros and Jacob Markstrom. So we'll get that confirmed tomorrow once that announcement comes out. We also saw a bunch of signings here today as well. We saw the San Jose Sharks extend a couple of players, including forward Alex Barabanov. Gets a 2-year deal at $2.5 million per season and a 10-team modified no-trade clause. So that's a pretty good deal for him. He's worked out well in San Jose after going there from the Maple Leafs. Of course, he came over from Russia, signed with the Leafs, didn't really find himself a role, wasn't getting much opportunity with the San Jose, and things have worked out much better for him over there. The Sharks also announced that they've extended defenseman Jacob Megna on a 2-year contract extension as well. The Seattle Kraken announced that they've extended Max McCormick. Of course, he's been playing a handful of games with them this year, but a player who kind of goes up and down between NHL and AHL. That's basically been the story of his career since he's been in the NHL or around it. McCormick gets a 2-year, 2-way contract with the Seattle Kraken. And of course, we also saw another prospect signing as well with the Minnesota Wild announcing they've signed Pavel Novak, who was a 2020 5th-round pick, born in the Czech Republic, right winger, played in the WHL this year for the Kelowna Rockets, and had a real solid year, putting up 72 points in 62 games. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when he makes the jump to pro hockey and see what he can do. So a very interesting prospect there for the Wild. We also got an announcement in Montreal that they announced that goalie Samuel Montembeault required wrist surgery, but he'll be able to recover and be fine to make it in time for training camp when things get underway in the fall in September. So, of course, we wasn't really aware of any kind of serious injuries or anything for Montembeault that required a surgery, so good to hear that he'll be ready to roll. I believe he's also a guy who needs a new contract going into this offseason here as well. Of course, in last night's playoff action, the NHL continues to have a lot of swings in the series. It seemed like one night, one team dominates. The next game, the other team seems to dominate. Not in all cases, but in many of these series, it's back and forth that way. A lot of the games are not overly close, and a lot of the games are we're not getting much in the way of overtime, but we are getting, like I said, tight series. So we saw the Bruins tie things up with Carolina with a 5-2 victory. We saw the Blues beat the Wild 5-2 as well. We saw the Lightning hammer the Leafs 7-3, and really at one point it was 5-0 early in the second period for Tampa. That game was over very, very early. The Leafs did respond late with a couple of goals, but it was too little too late by that point. And the LA Kings absolutely shut down the Oilers last night and did a great job. Jonathan Quick getting the shutout with a 4-0 victory. So all of those series are all squared up. Of course, tonight, as I record this now, we have the Rangers and Penguins doing battle in that series. We'll also have the Avalanche and the Predators going up here in a little while, as well as the Flames and the Dallas Stars. And, of course, the Capitals and the Panthers also underway here right now as well. So it'll be interesting to see how many of these series do end up going 6 or 7 games. Right now, the only team facing elimination is the Predators, as the Avs hold a 3-0 series lead and try to wrap things up this evening. Now, as I mentioned, we have some trade talk to look at as well. Of course, yesterday on the 32 Thoughts segment from the weekend, we discussed some news from the San Jose Sharks organization when Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick were reporting that they're likely pretty interested in trying to move one of their top defensemen. Of course, the San Jose Sharks are going to be hiring a new GM here shortly. They're going to be in a situation where they don't really want to rebuild. The ownership and new GM is going to want to take this team and try their best to contend and move forward with what they have. But of course, they do need to create some salary cap flexibility. And they have a lot of money invested in that Blue Line, as we know, for quite some time. Former GM Doug Wilson had a vision of having multiple top defensemen making big money to kind of quarterback this team to a Stanley Cup, and things never worked out. Of course, when they acquired Erik Karlsson, they already had Brent Burns, they had Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who of course at that point was starting to play, it was playing better, I should say. But now Burns and Karlsson are a luxury that they just can't afford to have at this point. And they're reporting that the Sharks are seriously wanting to move one of the two. Apparently, before the season was over, near the deadline, they did have conversations. We don't know what teams, of course, but there was some trade talk around Karlsson. Now, of course, we don't know where he would go because he has a lot of control over that, where he has a full no-move clause on his contract for the entire duration. So Erik Karlsson cannot be traded without his consent. I would think, just based on personal reasons, with his wife being from the Ottawa area. I'm not saying he wants to go back to Ottawa, but I would think they would prefer likely to head east somewhere closer to home, but that's, not confirmed. That's just an opinion of mine, but I know that's what was mentioned. Was it a year or two ago? There was some trade talk around Karlsson saying that he might request a trade from San Jose, or there was some talk about a deal, and he wanted to see if teams like Montreal, Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, that type of thing would be interested. And of course, nothing ever came from that. It turned out not to be accurate, but that was the rumor at the time. And of course, now based on what the situation is in San Jose, Friedman and Merrick talked about this a lot further today in the 32 Thoughts podcast, where Ellie could expand on it. And he said essentially, based on the contract of Erik Karlsson, it's a lot more likely that Burns would be the guy to go. Even though he's older, at 37 years old, he's still extremely productive, still a really good player, and shorter term on the contract, obviously a lot less term. And he has a big bonus being paid out this offseason. And after that, it's a really cheap money compared to what Burns' cap hit is. His cap hit's $8 million, whereas Karlsson is 11.5. And he does have a pretty strict rule in his contract around trades. He has a 3-team yes list, which still isn't easy. And if they don't really want to be moved, it's not going to be easy for them to do. They also discussed a Marc-Edouard Vlasic buyout, but they said based on all the comments and everything coming out of San Jose at the end of season media availability, it certainly doesn't sound like a buyout is something that's on the table right now. Of course, things could change. We'll see. But they were really kind of talking him up a little bit, and you can't help but wonder, as they were saying as well, that maybe they were kind of shining him up, making him sound good, just to kind of get his name out there for potential trades. But based on how Vlasic's played the last few years, I highly doubt that would be doable. Burns or Karlsson would be more likely, but like I said, with what they're saying, it makes a lot of sense. The Burns contract is probably way easier to move than Karlsson, but you just never know. So look for San Jose as they really explore for some salary cap flexibility this offseason and need to move one of these players that they just really, like I said, it's a luxury they cannot afford to keep at this point, and probably wasn't the greatest idea at the time. Like I said, I was quite surprised when Karlsson ended up being the destination for, or San Jose ended up the destination for Karlsson, but given the fact that it was being reported that he kind of wanted to sign an extension with wherever he went, and that teams weren't going to give up all these assets just to keep him for a short stretch. So obviously, they already had the Burns deal, they had the Vlasic contract, and it just, there was a lot of money tied up there, and they still found a way to give him $11.5 million, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, but we'll see what they do this offseason. Now, are the Vancouver Canucks trying to trade Oliver Ekman-Larsson after only 1 year after the big trade that happened last offseason between the Canucks and the Arizona Coyotes? And it appears that answer is yes, they are. And I've seen this reported from multiple sources, including Friedman, as well as some other Vancouver media. There are reports saying that the Canucks did attempt to engage OEL on some trade discussions earlier in the year, probably closer to the deadline, but he wasn't overly interested and kind of wanted to wait for the offseason to really give it any kind of consideration. Of course, he also has a no-move clause, so when they acquired him from Arizona, they got the money in the contract as well as that clause, and it's not going to be easy. But Vancouver media and Friedman are saying that he might want and be open to a deal, that he would like a bigger role. Obviously, he's used to being the main guy, goes to Vancouver where he's obviously not playing a lot behind Quinn Hughes, doesn't really get the opportunities on the offensive starts or the power play like he would have used to, and he's open to maybe moving is what things sound like. Of course, no guarantee. We don't know where he'd want to go. We don't know what it's going to take. They'd probably have to hold back a little bit of that salary, which is going to be tricky to do, but obviously it sounds like after only 1 year, of course, we have a new regime in place now. And we talked before about the fact that the Canucks want salary cap flexibility. They absolutely need it. Rutherford thought it was imperative, or they're not ready to even contend yet, that they don't have any space, any wiggle room. And like we already talked about, what's going to happen with guys like JT Miller. They'd like to sign him, but if they can't, a trade likely comes. In case of OEL, if they can move him, that would certainly give them more flexibility to pay Miller, which is probably something that would be more, right up their priority list. So we'll see if a deal can get done. At this point, we have no idea where he could go. When he went to Vancouver, the only teams that he really gave Arizona to work with was Vancouver and Boston. I can't see Boston having any interest at this point since they've acquired and extended Hampus Lindholm. But before that, they were still in the market for a left shot D. So that puts them out of the market. That's pretty much a given. And of course, now he's in Vancouver looking to move on. So I don't really know where he'd be open to going. It's kind of difficult to say. But obviously, it's going to have to be a team that has a little bit of flexibility. And I don't imagine the return going to Vancouver is going to be a whole lot, especially if they're expected to take on most of that contract. So we'll see. It won't be easy to do, but another player to watch as we get closer to the full scale of the offseason, the draft and free agency, and the crazier time of year where we see a lot of player movement. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.